Hello students, in the previous lecture we studied about three cantos of the poem Ode to the West Wind, and here we start the remaining two cantos of this poem and other characteristics of this poem. Let's we start. This is the remaining part of the poem Ode to the West Wind, which was written by the famous poet P.B. Shelley. Here is the canto fourth stanza first. If we were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power and share. Here the speaker finally brings his attention to himself. He imagines that he were a dead leaf which the wind might carry away, or a cloud which the wind might blow. He thinks about what is it would be like to be a wave at the mercy of the power of the wind. Here is the stanza second. The impulse of thy strength only less free than thou, O uncontrollable, if even I were as in my boyhood and cloud be. The speaker stands in awe of the wondrous strength of the wind. It seems to act on impulse and its strength is uncontrollable. He then mentions his own childhood. This is the stanza third of Canto 4. The comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then went to outstrip thy sky speed, scarce seemed a vision I would never have striven. Here the speaker seems to wonder whether the wind has gotten stronger since his childhood, or whether he has simply become weaker. He thinks that when he was a boy, he may have been about to outstrip the speed of the wind, and yet his boyhood seemed a vision so distant and so long ago. The speaker is clearly contrasting the strength of the wind to his own weakness that has come upon him as he has aged. This is the stanza fourth. As thus with thee in prayer in my sore need, O lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. Here the speaker finally comes to his request. Until now he has been asking the wind to hear him, but he has not made any specific request. Now he compares himself to a man in prayer in his sore need, and he begs the wind to lift him as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. He longs to be at the mercy of the wind, whatever may come of it. In the final line, he refers to himself as one who is in the final stage of his life when he says, I fall upon thorns of life, I bleed. Just like the wind swept away the dead leaves of the autumn, the speaker calls for the wind to sweep him away, old and decaying as he is. This is the final stanza of Canto 4. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee, tameless and swift and proud. The speaker says that the weight of all of his years of life have bowed him down, even though he was once like the wind, tameless, swift and proud. Then we come on Canto 5 stanza first. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own, the tumult of thy mighty harmonies? Again the speaker begs the wind to make him be at its mercy. He wants to be like a lyre or harp played by the wind. He wants to be like the dead leaves which fall to the ground when the wind blows. Here is the stanza second of Canto fifth. We'll take from both a deep autumn tune, sweet though in sadness, without spirit fears, my spirit without me, impetuous one. In this stanza of Ode to the West Wind, the speaker asks the wind to come into him and make him alive. This is yet another reference to the wind as a sort of god. In some religious, particularly the Christian religion, there is the belief that to have new life one must receive the Holy Spirit into his bodily being. This is precisely what the speaker is asking the wind to do to him. He realizes that for this to happen, his old self would be swept away. That is why he describes this as sweet though in sadness. But he asks the spirit of the wind to be his own spirit and to be one with him. Here is the stanza third. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by the incarnation of this verse, the speaker asks the wind to drive his dead thoughts over the universe so that even as he dies, others might take his thoughts and his ideas and give them new birth. He thinks that perhaps this might even happen with the very words he is speaking now. Here is the stanza 4. Scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind be through my lips to unawakened earth. The speaker asks the wind to scatter his thoughts as ashes and sparks, that his words might kindle a fire among mankind and perhaps awaken the sleeping earth. Here is the last stanza of the poem. The trumpet of a prophecy, O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? The speaker has used spiritual and biblical references throughout Ode to the West Wind to personify the wind as a god, but here he makes it a little more specific. When he says the trumpet of prophecy, he is specifically referring to the end of the world as the Bible describes it. When the trumpet of prophecy is blown, Christ is believed to return to earth to judge the inhabitants. The speaker asks the wind to blow that trumpet. Because of the speaker's tune throughout Ode to the West Wind, it would make sense if this was the speaker's own personal trumpet marking the end of his life. He wants the wind to blow this trumpet. With the last two lines of Ode to the West Wind, the speaker reveals why he has begged the wind to take him away in death. He says, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? This reveals his hope that there is an afterlife for him. He desperately hopes that he might leave behind his dying body and enter into a new life after his death. Then we come on the Major characteristics of this poem. Ode. An ode is a long lyrical poem which is written in stanzic form. It is an elaborately structured poem praising or glorifying an event or individual, describing nature intellectually as well as emotionally. In an ode, the poet directly addresses the object. A classical ode is structured in three major parts: the strophe, the antistrophe, and the epode. Different forms such as the homostrophic ode and the irregular ode also enter. This poem is a nature poem. Nature or love for nature is one of the dominant themes in romantic poetry. Like other romantic poets, Shelley is also an ardent lover and worshipper of nature. Almost all his poems abound in nature imagery, and some of his poems are purely of nature, such as Ode to the West Wind. In Ode to the West Wind, Shelley takes a powerful force from nature, the west wind, and renders it a mythical stature. Despite his subjective treatment of the natural object, Shelley does not attribute any human characteristics on it. Shelley is pessimistic in this poem. Shelley's temperament is a mixture of pessimism and optimism. When he writes or thinks of the regeneration of mankind or reformation of human society, his voice is optimistic enough. But when he writes about his personal life, he produces extremely melancholy strains. Ode to the West Wind, like many of his lyrics, is structured with melancholy, temperament, and personal despair. Shelley's optimism in this poem. The poem is a fine blending of Shelley's poignant personal note with his stirring optimism about the future of mankind. The poet is hopeful in the line, "If winter comes, can spring be far behind?" Here the poet is hopeful that if winter comes, then spring season will surely come. Here winter represents sorrows and spring represents happiness. The poet is very hopeful that if sorrows come in the life of a person, then happiness will surely come in the life of the person. Shelley is a prophet in this poem. Shelley is very popular in the world of English literature as a prophet and a social reformer. The last line of the poem shows him a prophet and a social reformer. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? In this line, the poet prophesies that if winter season comes, then spring season will surely come. Here winter represents sorrows and spring represents happiness. Here the poet prophesies that if sorrows come in the life of a person, then happiness will surely come in the life of the person. Shelley is a social reformer. Shelley is popular as a social reformer. Again, the last line of the poem shows him a social reformer. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? The poet advises those people who are disappointed in their life because of sorrows. The poet says that if sorrows come in the life of people, then happiness will surely come in those lives. So they should not be disappointed because of sorrows. They should be hopeful that happiness will surely come in their life. The structure of the poem. The poem is written in a complicated stanza form of 14 lines, each and technically known as terza rima. Its rhyme scheme is ABA. BCD, CDC, DED, EE. The meter divided into short periods is managed with complete mastery. Clutton Brock says, no one has ever made the ordinary heroic lines move so swiftly as Shelley. Thanks.